It was a cold November night in Moscow, Idaho. A quiet college town known more for its wheat fields and university life than for violence. Yet, what unfolded inside a small off-campus home would shake the nation. Four bright university students, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernadel, and Ethan Chapin, were brutally murdered while they slept. The nation watched in horror, asking the same question over and over again: who could commit such a crime? And just when it seemed like answers were finally coming, a shocking new twist has turned the entire case upside down. On the morning of November 13, 2022, police were called to a three-story rental house near the University of Idaho. What they found was a crime scene so gruesome, so chilling, that even the most seasoned investigators described it as unlike anything they had ever encountered. The four students, all close friends, had been stabbed multiple times with a fixed-blade knife. There were no signs of forced entry, no valuables taken, and perhaps most disturbing, two other roommates were inside the house that night, yet they were left completely unharmed. For weeks, the case grew cold. Rumors swirled on social media. Was it a stalker? A jealous ex? A stranger passing through town? The small community of Moscow was gripped with fear, locking doors, checking windows, and living in constant suspicion. Then, in late December 2022, police arrested a suspect, Bryan Kohberger, a 28-year-old criminology Ph.D. student from nearby Washington State University. The news shocked everyone. A man who studied crime, who analyzed criminal behavior, was now accused of committing one of the most brutal murders in modern American history. But here's where the story takes a dark and unexpected turn. Court documents recently unsealed suggest investigators may not have told the public everything. A new filing by the defense claims that DNA evidence found at the crime scene might not match Kohberger as clearly as prosecutors once suggested. For months, authorities insisted that a sheath left behind at the scene contained a DNA profile that directly linked Kohberger to the murders. This was their smoking gun. But now, whispers from inside the courtroom hint that the DNA evidence may not be as conclusive as once believed. And if that's true, then what does that mean for the case? Sources close to the investigation suggest that advanced genealogical testing was used to connect Kohberger to the crime scene, a controversial method that has solved cold cases but also raised serious questions about accuracy. The defense is pushing back hard, arguing that DNA alone cannot place Kohberger inside the home at the exact time of the murders. They point out that as a graduate student in criminology, Kohberger could have easily studied cases involving DNA and may even have been aware of how law enforcement tracks suspects. Even more troubling, new reports suggest that a second DNA profile, belonging to an unknown male, was also discovered at the scene. Who does this mysterious DNA belong to? Could another person have been inside that house? Or worse, could law enforcement have focused too narrowly on Kohberger, missing another potential suspect hiding in plain sight? As if the evidence wasn't complicated enough, people close to Kohberger describe him as socially awkward, highly intelligent, but also deeply troubled. Professors noticed his fascination with criminal psychology. Peers described him as someone who studied killers not just out of academic interest, but almost with obsession. Yet, in recent interviews, friends and classmates say they cannot imagine him committing such violence. He was odd, one former classmate said, but not the type you'd expect to do something like this. Could it be possible that Kohberger is a scapegoat? Or is this exactly what makes him the perfect suspect? A man who understood crime so deeply that he believed he could commit the perfect one? Meanwhile, the families of the victims continue to demand answers. Kaylee's father, Steve Goncalves, has been outspoken from the very beginning. He insists that the investigation has been sloppy and that the truth has not yet been fully revealed. In a recent statement, he hinted that there are things the public doesn't know yet, things that could change everything. Those words now seem more chilling than ever in light of these new DNA revelations. If the DNA evidence weakens in court, the prosecution's case could unravel. That would mean months of preparation, thousands of hours of investigative work, and the hopes of grieving families could all rest on shaky ground. Even worse, it raises an even darker question. What if the real killer is still out there? Imagine it. A killer who slipped past police, framed another man, and is now walking free while the world's attention remains fixed on Bryan Kohberger. As we await the next court hearing, one thing has become painfully clear: the Idaho student murders case is far from over. The DNA twist has thrown everything into chaos. Investigators are tight-lipped. Lawyers are battling behind closed doors. Families are left in limbo, desperate for closure. And the public is left asking, did police arrest the wrong man? Or is this just a clever defense tactic to cast doubt? The truth may be closer than we think, or further away than anyone dares to imagine. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension. Families sat in silence, eyes fixed on the prosecution's table. Across the aisle, Bryan Kohberger, the man accused of brutally murdering 4 University of Idaho students, stared blankly ahead. For weeks, whispers of an unknown DNA profile had fueled doubt. Was there another suspect? Was law enforcement chasing the wrong man? And most importantly, would justice for Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan ever be delivered? Just when it seemed like the case might collapse, a shocking new revelation silenced the room and changed everything. To understand the weight of this moment, let's go back. When Kohberger was first arrested, police claimed that DNA found on the sheath of a knife left at the crime scene linked directly to him. It was their cornerstone evidence, the thread tying him to the murders. But as the defense fought back, questions began to swirl. Reports of a mysterious second DNA profile suggested someone else may have been inside the house. For families already shattered by grief, this was almost unbearable. Had police made a mistake? Could the real killer still be free? During a crucial hearing, prosecutors dropped what can only be described as a bombshell of evidence. They revealed that the mysterious second DNA profile wasn't from another suspect at all. It belonged to a first responder who had entered the house that morning. The DNA, at first unidentified, had been mistakenly logged as unknown during the chaos of the crime scene. When investigators ran additional tests, it matched the profile of a paramedic who was there to assist. That meant the original DNA, the one on the knife sheath, remained untouched, uncontested, and unmistakably linked to Bryan Kohberger. The courtroom gasped. What had been painted as a possible opening for doubt was now explained in devastating clarity. Prosecutors then walked the court through the painstaking process of how Kohberger was identified. The sheath's DNA sample had been compared against a genealogical database, eventually tracing back to Kohberger's family. When law enforcement later collected DNA directly from the trash outside his parents' Pennsylvania home, it was a perfect match. And when they arrested Kohberger, swabs taken from him again confirmed the link. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a fluke. It was science, and it was damning. But the prosecution didn't stop with DNA. They painted a chilling picture of Kohberger's movements that night. His phone records placed him near the victim's house on multiple occasions before the murders. Surveillance footage captured his white Hyundai Elantra circling the area in the early morning hours. And after the killings, his digital footprint went silent for a crucial window of time, only to come alive again as he drove back toward his apartment. Experts testified that Kohberger had an obsession with studying killers, not to understand them, but to emulate them. His criminology surveys, where he asked criminals about how they planned and executed their crimes, took on a terrifying new light. It was as if he had been rehearsing, preparing for the night he believed would make him smarter than the police. But in the end, it was the smallest mistake, leaving a sheath behind, that unraveled everything. In the gallery, the families of the victims listened, tears streaming down their faces. For months, they had lived in limbo, torn between hope and despair. Now, with the DNA confirmed and the prosecution's case laid bare, a weight seemed to lift. Kaylee's father, who had been one of the most vocal critics of the investigation, whispered a single word as the evidence was read aloud: "Finally." The defense tried to push back, arguing that DNA alone couldn't prove intent. They suggested contamination, questioned police procedures, and hinted at circumstantial evidence. But the tide had turned. Jurors, shaken by the brutality of the crime and the overwhelming evidence, seemed unconvinced by the defense's narrative. After weeks of testimony, sleepless nights, and agonizing waiting, the jury finally returned with a verdict. Guilty. On all counts. The courtroom erupted with emotion. Some cried. Others embraced. For the families, it was bittersweet. Nothing could bring their loved ones back, but justice had been served. Bryan Kohberger was led away in handcuffs, facing life in prison, possibly even the death penalty. The case had gripped the nation for months, sparking debates about campus safety, forensic technology, and the dark psychology of killers. And while the scars would never fully heal, the families of Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan could finally begin to grieve knowing that the man responsible was behind bars. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered holding candles, honoring the 4 young lives lost. Their names echoed in the night, reminders of the tragedy, but also of resilience, unity, and the pursuit of justice. The Idaho student murders will forever remain one of the most haunting cases in American history. But in the end, science, perseverance, and the unyielding determination of grieving families ensured that justice was delivered. As the judge's gavel came down, one chapter of this horrific story finally closed. And while the memory of that November night will never fade, the message is clear. Even in the darkest corners, truth has a way of coming to light. Piece by piece, the puzzle was falling into place. Then came the most disturbing part, the motive.